Just as a reminder to everyone, this is an AMA format, an Ask Me Anything format. We are going to try and field as many questions as we can of yours. We've got a ton of people that are going to be rolling in sort of haphazardly, so I'm probably going to repeat these instructions a few times. On the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a little Q&A function that you have. If you click that Q&A function and ask a question in there, I will field the questions directly to Elouise, and then Elouise will be able to answer them. Also, there's a really cool chat functionality at the bottom of your screen as well. If you feel like you want to ask a question in there, please go ahead and do that. The chat functionality is super, super cool, and I think you'll get a lot of great use out of it. This whole session is being recorded, so if for whatever reason you have friends that can't join the session, it will be shared on Procurement Foundry Slack channel, and you'll be able to find it no problem. I'll post it there later today. Mike unfortunately couldn't join us. He had a scheduling conflict, but he sent me like 30 questions that he wants to ask. So we'll ask a few of those questions coming up. Before we get into it, Elouise would love to hear more about you and what you've been up to, and just so that the audience knows you a little bit better, some brief background as to what your focus is at A.T. Kearney. Oh, I think your sound is, your mic is off.
Ah,
there you go.
Yep. Sorry about that. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So those that don't know me, I've been with A.T. Kearney a little over 19 years, and I do digital procurement. I started my career doing e-sourcing back in the day, and so I've experienced the entire change. Back when technology disrupted everything, back when analytics disrupted everything, and now digital is disrupting everything. So I remember a lot. I lived through a lot, and I kind of know where all the skeletons are buried, as they like to say. What I do specifically is help companies figure out their digital procurement strategy and how to make sense of I'm very outspoken in saying that for 20 years, I've witnessed procurement technology fail to deliver. And what was promised is never what's delivered. And oftentimes we see it, A.T. Kearney sees it as consultants coming in to either pick up the pieces, help define a new strategy, and help improve things. And so then this is kind of one of my big arguments, is that with all the investment in the last 5 years and the innovation in digital and in other fields, it's come to procurement. And so now there's just a lot of excitement around procurement technology, procurement analytics, and things that you can do. And the clients I work with, we're really hungry for this because it is transformative. We've gone beyond all the hype, and actually there's a lot of value to be had day one. And so clients want a roadmap. They want an entry point, and pretty much every day, there's just a flood of new vendors and new concepts and new hype. And what I do, I navigate. I help my clients navigate that. And then of course I publish about that externally. I'm also on ISM's Thought Leadership Board, so I'm helping, I'm part of ISM's future growth as well. So I like to position myself as a digital futurist, as a fancy title, but I like looking ahead versus looking behind. So yeah, that's me. And
I love that, because the first time I heard you speak at Spark, and it totally blew my mind about what's been done. And we spoke about AI hubs and all of that kind of stuff. And maybe we'll get to that later on in the discussion, but let's start square one. When we talk about digital procurement, first of all, what does that even mean? And how does one get started on that journey?
Yeah, so I think the important thing to define it, so I have a very simple definition. You have every company has goods and services they need to acquire, right? I mean, that's the whole point procurement exists. And so it's finding finding good technology and generating good insights through analytics, and taking the two to create that need to buy goods and services and creating value for the company. It's as simple as that, right? It's we have a need, we have these tools and techniques, let's merge the two and create value. Because if you're not creating that value, then you're just doing technology for technology's sake. So it has to be really anchored in the business.
Awesome. And then so if a company wanted to get started on that, there's a lot of procurement executives that are listening to us right now. If they wanted to get started on that and sort of build that and fund that journey, how do they build the business case around that?
So I like to, and also, I like to, pretty much I can walk into any procurement organization. I can predict with 80, 90% specificity without knowing anything about their systems where their pain points are. And we can go around the whole, and I have a slide that I can post later, a slide that shows the maturity of contracting systems, sourcing system, requisition systems, master data management systems in procurement, all of these things. And I can walk in and I can show you how immature as an industry procurement is. And pretty much, and this is what I do, I go into companies and say, you probably have this pain point, this pain point, this pain point, this pain point. And oh, by the way, because of those pain points, you're leaving tremendous value on the table. So let me give you an example. How many people do sourcing events, create a contract, and then try to reconcile what was negotiated versus what was spent versus what was delivered? And I don't mean like three-way match. I mean actually getting into the details. Were SLAs met? Were there components that needed to be tracked that weren't? I mean, by and large, a lot of this stuff is just, sort of set to the side. Or, most companies are not effectively sourcing services. You have massive categories, IT, marketing, legal. These are massive categories for companies, and they get largely untouched. Now, we pretend and we sort of move papers around. Well, nobody moves papers around, but we create a lot of activity, but not a lot of value. And so there's just, values, creation just waiting to happen. And so when you bring in tools like these or techniques, then that business case writes itself. And, and it's not just about cost savings, because if I ask you, do you have the right suppliers? Do you have the right suppliers to meet your corporate objectives? Do you know the sustainability, the risk profile, your cybersecurity, all of these things? Most people struggle with that, and it's not a criticism. I blame the technology, but I blame the technology a lot. But it's if I ask for who are your tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, what's the risk profile, what's their sustainability score, I get blank looks, and it'll take them 3 or 4 weeks to, they'll get a bunch of spreadsheets, and that's not effective procurement, right? That's just busy work that doesn't need to happen. 10 years ago, we needed to do it that way. 5 years ago, we did do it that way. But if you're doing that today, you are going to encounter a greater challenge as you go forward.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about emerging technology sweeping through the industry, right? Like RPA and blockchain and AI and all that kind of stuff. A lot of buzzwords. Can you give us an idea on when you see sort of the tipping point coming to a head? Meaning, like, when are these ideas or these items going to be mainstream for us? Or are we there already?
So when I present, I usually ask somebody in the audience, I give them a blunt object and ask them to throw it at me if I use the terms machine learning, AI, blockchain, because those terms are so overhyped, and anybody that uses them is either trying to sell you on something or is overly excited about something. As we look at digital procurement, I never use those terms because it's not relevant. What we want to do, they're means to an end. They're embedded in the technologies or the analytics we use, but we as procurement, and that includes me, who I spend my entire time doing digital, I don't need to know the details of the underlying enablers, which is machine learning and all those other buzzwords and blockchain and whatnot. Because if we're focused on that, we're not focused on the business objective. And sort of like, let me just go back to that, supplier list example. Like, I want to know what the risk profile is of my suppliers. Now, if you use AI or machine learning to enrich or classify or harmonize those suppliers, that's great, but that's not my problem. That's the vendor's problem. That's under the hood. That's the black box. I don't need to tease that apart. And so, I'm very bullish about not using those terms. I think they have matured. I think you see them. They're in your phone. They're in the apps that we use, and that's great. It should all be there. But nobody buys blockchain, right? Nobody buys AI. Now, do you want guaranteed identity management? Sure, right? And it takes a combination of those technologies or other technologies that are coming. But I always dissuade people from using, even the vendors. I say, you got to move past this, because nobody buys the enabler. You buy the business problem. And I just because I like to talk a lot, but at Kearney, we only focus on the business problem, because that's where we play, and that's really where the focus needs to be.
Totally.
That's my soapbox issue.
No, I love that. It seems to me in the last few years, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a massive shift away from sort of these large ERP ecosystems to built for purpose apps and tools. I mean, thinking about Scout and Tealbook and all these different types of companies that are built for a specific purpose. And so people are moving away from sort of the one source does everything thing. But there's a lot of us listening to this call that have implemented Jagger and SAP and Oracle and all of these large systems that are supposed to be totally P2P. What now? What do we do now?
Yeah, so I think let me answer this in a very long-winded way, because I've witnessed this, right? We started in the 2000s with best of breed, and then it became clear that you needed the ERP integration. So that's when you got all the consolidation with Ariba buying Free Markets, and then eventually SAP buying Ariba, and IBM buying MTORS, and so on and so forth, right? Because ultimately the end game until recently was you had to get that backbone tie-in to the ERP system. Now that's not true. That's not true anymore. This is the massive paradigm shift, and I'll come back to the other part of your question in a minute. But now we have all these best of breeds again, fit for purpose, and the underlying integration, that's handled by the technology. The technology is more sophisticated. When I talk about an AI hub or an integration hub, these things are very sophisticated. The technology it's used in the high tech industry. It's used in financial systems. So the underlying technology has matured, and now it's making its way to procurement. And so now, it opens up this ability to really think beyond just the ERP system. The single provider is no longer, it's just not that, it's not the best. The single provider can't keep up. Coupa cannot make enough acquisitions fast enough. Ariba can't do enough acquisitions fast enough. Plus they have their own roadmaps, and they have their own challenges in the market. So trying to keep up with the startups that keep popping up, it's like whack-a-mole for them. And so the question is less about, and to be clear, I don't go in and say, oh, well, you just put in a $5 million Coupa installation. You should just rip that out, right? What I talk about is two things: is layering, right? Is starting to layer in technologies that extend or do things that are complementary to your, whatever system you have today. And if you then start to think about, because the whole point is not so much the technology, it's you need the organization to shift, right? Right now, most organizations have one person maybe dedicated to procurement technology. Yeah. And you need to start building that into a bigger team, a digital operations team, And that team needs to look and monitor and evaluate and do proof of concepts and MVPs with these vendors over time. And so the whole point is even if you have Coupa today and it's great, or you have Ariba and you have some challenges, or vice versa, I'm not picking on one or the other. Whatever you have, it's not good enough, right? And so you need to think about and work towards building the capabilities to layer in and start to extend what you have, because no P2P no source to pay system has everything. And there's just so much innovation. I can do a whole other thing about innovation in this space, that you really need the flexibility and the skills to adopt this stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So,
that
I
was a
mean,
long-winded answer.
no, it was brilliant, and it totally answered exactly what we wanted. Talking about innovation, I mean, there's so many players on the market now. I mean, I was just chatting with the guys at Fair Market, speaking of innovation, and they're doing their Series A raise right now. And
Yep.
the guys at Scout RFP are constantly innovating with everything that they've got going on. Where are some other areas where innovation is taking place?
Oh, I mean, it's all over I see it all around. So I have a chart, and I don't have it readily readily accessible, but I'll post it afterwards, of all the startups I'm tracking. I track like 24, I think it's 24, wow, 26 startups. And I mean, everything from contract compliance, with Seal software, Tealbook for virtual vendor master, those two, Globality for sourcing services. But even I was just talking to BidOps yesterday, Edmund, the founder there, or CEO, and that was new to me. And they're just coming on the market, and it's it's like they're reimagining the whole bidding process.
Wow.
And to me, I mean, as somebody who's old and jaded and sort of like, I was really impressed that they have a whole new fresh take on it. No, I don't know if it's commercially viable. I don't know how it'll play out. But as somebody that studies this extensively, I think that's really amazing. And that's on one hand, they're basically saying, you as the sourcing or the category manager, sourcing manager, here's a new tool, new way to do it. On the other side, you see Keelvar and Ziva and some of the others that are doing, automated bidding, right? These bots that do the bidding. And so, maybe it's a combination, but you start to see this. And then the other one that I just met with last week was Vinio. And what they do is process intelligence, and they look at your processes through the P2P system, as well as, this is me pushing them to do compliance as well. And the ability to do intelligence, analytics, and process mapping. So if you are going to do things like RPA or BPM, business process management, you actually need to put some intelligence behind it. And so now you see a higher order tool like Vinio coming along. Like, to me, it's very exciting, because you can see the depth that's just layering up above your core P2P system. And when you see it through my glasses, it's like that OMG moment that says this is bigger than one company, this is bigger than one ERP, and this is going to take, and the future is arriving. It has arrived. So let's embrace this. I'm excited.
Yeah. And so, I mean, speaking of the future, there's a lot of us now who are listening to this going, awesome, I'm on board. But when we try and sell this upstream to a CFO or someone in a leadership capacity to say, look, we need to think not about where we are now and the goals we want to achieve, but what's going to happen 5 years from now and what technology we're going to try and implement. When we're trying to focus on selling that as a value proposition, are we selling it as, we can replace X amount of headcount, we can build this much value? How do we sell that?
Yeah. So, and by the way, there's two sales that have to happen, because I suspect this question will come up. We have to sell to the CFO, and we also have to sell to the CIO, right? Yeah. So I'll do the CFO first, because they kind of go in tandem, or usually get some version of both of these. So the CFO is, the short term is you're leaving value on the table. Let's go get that. There's some categories that have never been touched by sourcing. You get 30, 40%. Or if you don't really have a sourcing factory and you're not really, because you have a, let's just call it a legacy sourcing tool, nobody uses it, you can drive a lot of volume. Or if you start to do the automated sourcing, you can drive a lot of volume and get a lot of short-term savings. That's the best play, or contract compliance or so forth. And then, you start to move into the risk conversation, right? Because risk avoidance, while that's not an immediate tangible benefit that you can measure, it's one that's on everybody's mind today. Probably it's increasingly so. And so there's a short-term or sort of medium-term risk benefit, and then the longer term is process efficiency. And I see procurement organizations as a 10-to-1 process efficiency. So that means if you have 100 people today, you'll have 10 tomorrow, or 1,000 to 100. And it's not that the people get fired, right? In IT, HR, some of the other back office functions, I think that is true. That's what happens. IT is consolidated. HR and finance will continue to consolidate. But I think procurement, what will consolidate is all the busy work, like all this chasing of Excel files, all this chasing of data. And what it'll enable is people to actually do good procurement, like to do the value add, to move upstream into the product engineering to help the design to source, or, the design sourcing and the design, making some of those strategic plays further upstream before it becomes a problem. And of course, having greater visibility into the planning function as well. And so you can't do that today when you're chasing Excel spreadsheets, right? Or you're reacting to whatever, whatever request for this report, this rebate report or whatnot, because those problems are just overwhelming. So I think, let me go back. Just short term, there's benefits to capture, tangible benefits. Medium term, it's risk, corporate responsibility, things that are really strategic to probably the CEO and or the board. And then long term is the process efficiency as your org changes and you hire the right digital operations people.
Yeah, I love
For
that.
the CIO, yeah, thank you. And the CIO is, they'll look at, they'll say IT likes a very singular system like Ariba or like SAP. You bolt on Ariba or Coupa, you got the whole thing there. But I would say there's two things to say there. And then when you look at all these point solutions I've been talking about, and like that's overwhelming. I have some clients that just kind of like freak out and they're like, no. But if you think about Salesforce, right? IT is on board with Salesforce, right? And so sales organizations, they buy Salesforce and then, they might have 20, 30, 40 apps within Salesforce that they use. And it's the same thing is going to happen here, right? It's eventually somebody's going to be that major player in the middle of the quote unquote Salesforce of procurement. And then all these apps will plug into, there'll be the hub and all these apps will plug into the hub. So IT will be less of an issue because, the model's already out there. And just parenthetically, this has to happen for the ERP systems too. If we think procurement's in bad shape, ERP systems are a complete disaster. I mean, that's probably the next 20 years of my career is going to be looking at those systems for the same kind of trends, because it's even worse on that. But anyway, so that's how you kind of address both the CFO and the CIO, because those questions will come up almost immediately.
Yeah, there's a great question here from Paula related to the ERP side of things. It's two parts. One is, so are we saying that the value from point solutions with all their robust capabilities outweighs the challenges of multiple integrations, and that's therefore a better approach to, for example, a single suite like an SAP, which may not necessarily be as robust? And then the second question is, if that's true, do you think the size of these major ERP providers will allow them to invest in their solutions to meet those capabilities of the point solutions, or are they just too big and too slow?
That was two great questions. So I think, well, I'll try to actually answer them both at the same time. I think the second question is the one that's to be seen, right? Can these big vendors move the ship and do what they need to do to compete? There's no, and by that, I mean, they need to open up their systems. They need to make it simple for Scout to, plug Scout right in and just accept that their sourcing module is terrible. And I'm not picking on anyone, but, or that you need to extend, because I make the argument you need at least 4 sourcing tools and possibly 5. So, and after bid ops, maybe it's 6, I don't know. But, so just trying to constrain you to one sourcing tool creates inefficiencies, and it impairs your ability to function as a procurement organization. So the vendors have to move in this direction. The big 6, as I call it: Ariba, Jagger, Coupa, I guess, Oracle, and the one I'm forgetting. But they have to move in this extensibility. They have to be more extensible. So and the reason and why this is important is it shouldn't matter if you have your core system and 4 bolt-ons or 40 bolt-ons. Right now, they charge you. This is my biggest pet peeve: is you buy one of these systems and then they make you pay to integrate them. And I don't think I think that's wrong. And procurement's one of the last functions that pays for those integrations, because you look in the high tech space, in software development and all these tools that sort of power the high tech industry, you don't pay for any integrations. All the integrations are seamless. So that has to come to procurement. Now is the time. This is and because the fact that you as the client has to pay for the integration it's morally wrong. Or maybe not morally wrong, but and I don't appreciate
it's extortion,
it, or I don't.
essentially.
It is extortion, yeah. And then, but I also think we get sold on, back to the ERP integration question, we get sold on this ERP integration, and I think it fails to deliver. And I think, as these companies, these big 6 make acquisitions, they are slow to integrate. And in some ways, they almost never integrate them. And even if you have one ERP system and it's connected, let's say you went with SAP and you add the Ariba system, let's say it's all integrated, which we all know it's not, because the temp labor and the travel. Why am I drawing a blank on the pieces that Ariba bought? They're just not they're not integrated yet. They're very public about that. But that's fine. Let's say you have one full system, right? One full SAP system. Well, that's fine, except the moment your company buys another or acquires another company and you start to get the ERP proliferation. I have some clients that have 60 ERP systems, 70, 80 ERP systems. Like, that whole integration argument just falls apart, because there's just so much complexity. And the companies we work with tend to be larger and tend to acquire and tend to have this. So the integration, I think, is long been used, and we've been sort of coached that it's this big scary monster. And I think that's changed.
Yeah. Do you, left field question here, do you see cryptocurrencies starting to gain traction in the enterprise? And how long before, or is it possible that procurement departments start dealing with crypto and accepting crypto payments?
So we have some. So do I think that it's here? No, I think it's a ways off. I think, but we do have, that said, we do have a couple of clients that have done that, and procurement's been involved in that, because it's very much tied to what crypto does, and sort of blockchain, if you will, is sort of, it flattens the supply chain, and all the way from the the sourcing to the payment. and sourcing, distribution, and the payment. And so, and it makes that very linear, which is great because you get the full transparency and you get the payment and so forth. But I think there's a lot of impediments to that. And so and sort of back to the previous example, when you have, one full system, okay, it's fine, right? You have all the modules, great. But I think the complexity comes with suppliers that are not as, that can't get on the system, that don't have, that don't have the technical capability. And in a big enterprise, it doesn't take long to find, your entire tier one supply base can't handle something like that. I mean, just look at our credit cards, just go a little left field. We have credit cards, we have debit cards, we have PayPal. You can pay it, you can go in PayPal, you can do Venmo, and like all these proliferations. And sometimes it feels like when you want a frictionless checkout experience, and everybody's trying to figure out if somebody's writing a check and somebody's using a credit card and somebody's so it's a similar dynamic, I think, with putting crypto into corporate procurement. I think it'll come, and like I said, we have one or two case studies where we've helped them do it. And ironically enough, or interestingly enough, I think it's probably more accurate, is we see it in the emerging markets, certainly in China and India, where you have an emerging supply base that is growing with the companies themselves. It's a lot easier to do that, and the systems over there are fit for purpose versus trying to deal with all the regulation. And I think that, not to get into politics, but I think that has to do with government participation, let's call it, and investment and whatever you want to add to that, and that helps really spur that innovation.
Awesome. One of the big issues that I find in a lot of procurement organizations is that maybe it's a demographic thing, but the vast majority of us are quote unquote digital tourists. But the next generation of procurement and sourcing people they're digital natives. So for all of us that are digital tourists, what advice would you give us to attempt to keep up and get ahead of this?
I do what is it? What do they call the upward mentoring, where, you have mentees and then you then turn around and ask them to mentor you. I think that's super important. And I think it's, so that helps teach you, right? That helps sort of, and it breaks down barriers, right? Because I think there's an authenticity issue when we as older people say, this is how you have to do it. And that flies in the face of their experience. And so I think by, it's sort of this paternalistic or patriarchal, I know best because I've been doing this for, 20 years, right? Yeah. And it's sort of saying, no, I'm treating you as an equal. You have this experience and this this capability that I don't have, and it's saying, okay, well, let's meet in the middle. I can sort of talk to you about things I've learned in organizational politics and studying macroeconomic trends and how that might impact business decisions at the board level, and then how it translates down to us here in procurement. And then you can also tell me why all of those processes are archaic, and whatever technology what we should pay crypto payment, right? Like that would solve all of these problems. And so you started getting a dialogue versus I know best. And so I think that's one thing. And two is just keep an open mind, right? It's and it gets back. I think those of us that have been around for a while, we can learn. I mean, it is exciting. It's okay for us to stop and say, hey, you know what? That's pretty cool. Let's go do that. And I think to that, one of the things that I do with my clients is I bring them to San Francisco for a day or two and introduce them to a very specific curated set of startups. And part of that is to get them to see and understand and build their skill set and their terminology, we call it funds of knowledge. And so we bring, and the whole point is they walk away excited about the technology, and they don't have to fear it, because often fear leads to bad behaviors, right? I talked about the integration fear. Oftentimes IT use that fear of integration to force bad decisions on us. And I think it's a similar thing. It's like, I fear technology. Like, I don't understand crypto. Like, I don't understand how this could even possibly help me. So I'm just going to kill it from the get-go.
Yeah, stick
and
my
I
head
think
in the
that's very
sand and ignore
demotivating.
it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's very demotivating.
Totally. People fear what they don't understand, right? That's, I think, the biggest thing is, like, you don't understand the tech that's coming in. And so a lot of people just stick their head in the sand and hope it goes away. And I found that the
Yeah.
people that are at least mature enough to recognize that they 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 don't know what they don't know, they're now starting to hire for those things. And
Yeah.
so what I've seen is, especially in procurement, they're not, like, leaders aren't pulling from necessarily supply chain programs in university or procurement programs in college. They're pulling from the STEM fields. Like, they're pulling math majors, they're pulling analysts, they're pulling junior consultants from, Kearney or some of the other ones, and just trying to get that, like, a totally different, diverse skill set, because they know that this is coming and they need to build the talent for that.
Well, and I would also say, so that's exactly right. So I talked about the ISM Thought Leadership Board, and that's one of the exact topic. And I think across all of us agree that you just hire talent now. You don't even care what, you can train somebody how to source a category or to do whatever needs to be done. So, and you need to just hire people that have those skills you just talked about. I would also throw in humanities and the arts, because that's my background. But I think there is elements of critical thinking and thinking outside the box and innovation that humanities and arts do contribute. I think what's different, what I would say is just getting an MBA is not good enough anymore.
That's right.
Right. Right. And just, you need to be well-rounded. And it's not only to compete against the other people in the job market, but it's also, that's what's required of you. You get thrown into situations that are just totally different than what you studied. And let's say you got your MBA in procurement, right? That's great, or supply chain, and you come out and you're really dialed into cost savings, category management, so forth. And let's say your CPO decides to look for top line growth activities. So that means you have to engage with suppliers and start to look at commercial terms for investment, for ROI, and so forth. Well, that takes a whole different skill set than your MBA trains you for, or, I'm oversimplifying, but, it's this ability to interact and, research and ask questions and things that are, so when the reason we want well-rounded employees is for that very reason, because businesses are pivoting, right? I mean, you look at Apple, all of a sudden, boom, they're now in the financial industry, right? They have credit cards. They don't make those pivots by spending a lot of money. They make those pivots, because they hire people that can, learn this stuff and adopt it. And I know this because, these tech companies or these companies that are very aggressive, in this term, they'll hire consultants like us for short projects, mine all of our information and then go engineer it into. It's actually very brilliant. I admire them for it. So.
Yeah. Speaking of getting ahead of things, is there one emerging technology that you think, it's not mainstream yet, but procurement has to get ahead of it? What would it be? It's a big question.
Probably, no, there are so many. I think it depends on your situation. I think probably the most exciting one no, I can't say that. They're all exciting to me. I think the one that you should be focused on is what I call data lake in a box. So Soplari is a great vendor. And what they do is they have this virtual container that sits on, and it collects all your procurement data. So whether it's your P2P data, your spend data, or your sourcing data, your contracting data, even your HR data, and they put it into one big container and they normalize and they do all the other stuff. And then, and so that's where they're at today. So you can, if you're not doing this today, because as industry, we're terrible at analytics because we have a data problem. We have a fundamental foundational data problem.
Yeah.
I think you have to solve it in a combination of ways, which is a little bit Tealbook and a little bit Supply, but so I think they're in tandem. But the or whomever, those are just the two that sort of pop to mind when you ask that question. So, but Supply, then once you have it in one big container, then they're well positioned, and vis-a-vis you are well positioned to start doing the analytics and the really generating the insights that you need to really create value. Because these are so building your data lake is not, you can't start that in 5 years. You need to start that now. And the good news is most organizations have some foundation for the data lake. So to be able to have this virtual procurement data lake container, overlay it, it's brilliant. And it's still emerging. And I wouldn't say that it's, you're going to just sign up today and it's more of a journey. But I think that's, if you want to know the one thing that I would do, and it's pretty much the top of my list aside from cost, savings opportunities, it's get your data foundation. And I think it's predominantly, a data lake concept like Supply. They're the only ones that I've seen it really positioned this way. And then somebody like Tealbook to do your harmonization and your enrichment, because that's sort of the second part is everything you need to do in procurement all ties back to your supply base. So whether it's your existing supply base, your future supply base, supplier performance, relationships, all of that. So if you don't have good, strong supplier data, and that's where I feel like Tealbook just excels really well. So
yeah,
that's why I like this. Those are the two. Yeah.
No, I love it, because one of the questions, this brings up another question for me. One of the questions that you and I had discussed a while back was whenever someone hears, that they have to house their data in a data lake and all that kind of stuff, they're thinking of like all the steps before that. They're thinking of data cleansing and all that kind of stuff. And we've had a fairly robust discussion about, okay, does your data need to be perfect? Does your data need to be perfect before you move it into something like that? And I'd love to get your point of view of that so that the listeners can hear about it.
So this is where I talk. So this is another fear factor, right? That we have, and it's we've learned the hard way that bad data is bad data, and it's hard to do anything with it. But I think why I get so excited about tools like Tealbook is they make it simple. They simplify it, right? You just give them all your vendor master data, and they use enablers, right? AI or whatever. It doesn't even matter, right? This is again why it doesn't matter. You give them your vendors and they run it through their systems, and they harmonize it, they enrich it, and then you have a solid record to work from. Because if you put yourself in Tealbook's shoes, and they work in healthcare, for example, the healthcare industry, and they have everybody's master data, or at least vendor masters, how much commonality do you think there is? There's probably 90% are the same suppliers, right? I mean, the scientific materials or the lab materials or whatever, or R&D trials, I mean, they're all the same supply base. So the fact that you're sort of looking at it in what is in essence a consortia without being a consortia, it's like there's very little. So the fact that you would have dirty data is becoming a crutch, especially if you're in healthcare or finance or some of these industries where the supply base is not that big. It's just not really that big, and it shouldn't be. And so so I think we need to get beyond the fear and just say that these companies can clean the data, and they can clean it fast, and it's not your job. Your job is to find the Tealbook or the Supply and give them your data, and your job is to build the business case. Your job is to get the funding, and oftentimes these companies, it's a low barrier to entry, not free, but it's a low barrier to entry for that very reason.
When including data in this data lake, what's the one data element that most orgs forget to include? This question's from Paula.
HR data, because you actually can then tie back to who's doing what, and so that tie back from because we're very good, even if we do it parenthetically in our head, right? We know what we what we contracted for. We kind of know what was delivered, and we know what was paid, and maybe there's some variance in there, or we can see where our requisitioners went to buy office supplies or do their meeting things, and we can even control it in some cases, right? But to be able to have that HR link and to be able to tie that back to who's doing what starts to open up a whole new set of conversations about who's doing what. And again, not in a bad way, but in a positive way. What's working well? What could be better? Where are people getting hung up? And remember, I talked about Maya and Vinio, the process intelligence tool. You start to layer, you start to get the HR data, and that you start looking at the processes of how people are using your systems. Those are two powerful data sources that if we're worried about clean data, we're not even getting to that higher order, issues of who's doing what's the best practice, and sort of how people are using the system.
When people hear you speak, well, the impression that I get is Elouise is so dialed in on what's going on and what's coming up and what are the upcoming trends. And so naturally, my thought is, where are you getting the information? Like, how do you stay on top of all of this? How do we get as dialed in? I mean, we're not going to get as dialed in as you are, but where do we source information about all of this stuff?
Well, hey, that's nice of you to say. But part of it is it's my job, right? And maybe more so. I should probably be selling more than studying this, but I'm absolutely captivated by this market. But I think where you should go for it is trusted advisors, and it doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be consultants. I mean, and so let me go back to where I learned. I learn from talking to my colleagues. I listen. I listen to things like your podcast. And I actually, what I find interesting is who you interview and who others are doing. But by and large, where I learn is the most by talking to people. And I have the advantage of I present to at least one CPO a week, or I average that. So, and I get lots of feedback, right? And sometimes my presentation is stellar, and sometimes it, flops, right? Like sometimes the executives are not having it. And so, but what I do is I always learn, and I'm continually, building the story out. And so I get this, hands-on talking to lots and lots and lots and lots of clients, and even in a session like this. And then I also talk to the startups and the people investing. I talk to the VCs that invest in the startups, and I just, out there talking to people, and I listen, and I will take pretty much any call. As long as they're not trying to sell me, because I have nothing to buy. But I just because there's just so much information to glean about the maturity. What are the terms they're using? Well, who are their clients? And this is why a trusted advisor sometimes is good, is because I talk to the clients and I get their perspective. I talk to the tech companies, I get their perspective. And I talk to clients that, I get this sort of three-way match of my own of information. And then I can read about it at the same time, the Gartners or the Forresters, or the Spend Matters. And I can sort of formulate based on these inputs. And so, and probably, I talked about, I bring these CPOs out to San Francisco. I think that's their big takeaway is I use my knowledge to help show them what can help their business. And I think that makes a huge difference, because that's my value add as an expert. And that's why I work so hard to position myself as an expert, because and it's clearly what I'm passionate about.
Love that. To that end, if people wanted to follow you online, because you're a thought leader in this space, and for us to try and find all of those individual sources would be insanely time consuming. So it's easier just to follow you. So how do we do that? How do we follow you online?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. You can follow me. You can message me. And if you message me on LinkedIn, I'll just give you my email address. And then I respond to email. It's kind of like Pavlov's theory. Like, email I'm dialed into and will respond. I'm slow at LinkedIn, as Mark, you found out. But I'm happy to talk about this, because every time somebody asks me a question, I learn something myself. So I'm happy to share my information. And then I publish white papers very frequently. We have 11 published about the future of procurement, tackling digital, tackling private equity. That's our most recent one, tackling analytics, CEO agenda. And then I of course present at conferences a lot. So you can find me at the ISM, a lot of ISM events. You can find me at Spark. Maybe they'll bring me back. Or the Bay Area Procurement Council, Chicago Procurement Council. A lot of these, I try to make myself very available. Just like I said, for the sheer fact that Paula, who asked a couple questions about ERP integration, that triggers new thoughts for me, and so I'm always very accessible and very happy to talk.
Awesome.
Or email.
Awesome. For the people watching right now, the viewers and the listeners, just so that you know, I will make sure that Elouise's contact information is all available, her social profiles and everything like that. We're nearing the end. Thank you so much to everyone who participated today. I really, really appreciate it. If you're new to the Procurement Foundry and you just got an invite here because someone invited you and you're like, hey, this sounds pretty cool, I think I'll join in, please do sign up. You can just ask your friend who invited you where you got that, or contact me directly or Mike Cadju. Elouise, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really, really appreciate it. You've got so much knowledge to share, and the fact that you were here for an hour to share it with us is a big deal. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak.
You're so welcome.